Galactic gossip paints humans as frail, fleshy, outgunned underdogs. But when an 8-foot alien war master tried making an example of a 19-year-old Earth cadet, human morale refused to break. Instead, that towering commander shattered his own dominant arm. 3 seconds later, a fearsome extraterrestrial general was begging for mercy. The Olympus Mons Joint Military Academy was supposed to be a symbol of unity, a sprawling domed facility built into the rust-red rock of Mars. It was the first place where the Galactic Concordat and the newly integrated United Earth Directorate agreed to train their future officers side by side. It was a multi-trillion credit diplomatic handshake funded heavily by off-world mining conglomerates and Earth's own defense giants like Lockheed Space Systems and Boeing Exoferix. But down in the sparring yards, beneath the hum of the atmospheric scrubbers, diplomacy was a joke. Out here, it was all about mass, density, and dominance. Cadet Wyatt Cole didn't look like much, even by human standards. Standing at 5 feet 10 inches and weighing a lean 170 pounds, he was a kid from the brutal, climate-ravaged sprawl of former Chicago. Before enlisting, Wyatt had run logistics for Academia Interstellar, a private military contractor operating in the asteroid belt. He had spent his teenage years hauling tungsten loads in microgravity and surviving decompression blowouts. He was quiet, unassuming, and had a habit of staring at the floor when he was bored. To General CRA of the Othari Empire, Wyatt Cole was nothing more than an insult. The Othari were a proud conquering species. Towering at over 8 feet tall, their bodies were encased in natural chitinous armor plates that looked like polished obsidian. Their skeletal structure was carbon silicate-based, completely rigid, built to withstand the crushing atmospheric pressures of their home world, Othar Prime. They didn't have muscles like humans did. They had complex hydraulic-like fiber bundles that allowed for explosive, devastating movements. In the wider galaxy, the Othari were the undisputed masters of close-quarters combat. General CRA was a veteran of the Centauri campaigns. He had personally broken the spines of rebellious Krell warriors and crushed the skulls of the mantis-like Vex with his bare hands. He had been assigned to the Academy as an instructor to assess the human race's viability for frontline infantry. Secretly, he was there to prove they were useless. The Galactic Concordat had a fundamental misunderstanding of humanity. Because humans were relatively small, lacked natural weapons like claws or venom, and possessed soft, permeable skin, the wider galaxy categorized Earth as a Class 3 temperate habitat. They hadn't looked at the gravitational data properly. They hadn't accounted for the fact that Earth's gravity was nearly 3 times that of the galactic average, or that humans were essentially hyperdense persistence predators wrapped in a thin layer of flesh. It was a Tuesday during a combined arms tactical simulation when the friction finally sparked into an inferno. The training yard was a desolate stretch of simulated urban ruin coated in the pervasive fine Martian dust that managed to slip past the environmental seals. The exercise was simple. Hold a fortified position against simulated drone fire while enduring an artificial gravity dampener that randomly fluctuated between 0G and standard Mars gravity. CRA stood on an observation gantry, his 4 mandibles clicking in irritation as he watched the human squad. They were grouped with a squad of tall, spindly avian aliens known as the Sylvans. When the gravity generator spiked, the Sylvans immediately collapsed, their hollow bones groaning under the pressure. The humans, however, just grunted, widened their stances, and kept their kinetic rifles leveled at the drone spawns. Wyatt Cole was on point. His uniform was soaked in sweat, but his breathing was steady. He had spent 2 years working on a privately funded DARPA centrifuge project before his PMC days. This artificial gravity felt like a warm-up. "Look at them," CRA snarled to his adjutant, a smaller Othari named Vok. "They do not move with grace. They are rigid, stubborn animals. They lack the biological supremacy required for the vanguard." "They are maintaining the line, General," Vok pointed out hesitantly. "The Sylvans have failed. But the humans are too stupid to know when they are broken," CRA interrupted, stepping off the gantry. He plummeted 30 feet, his carbon silicate bones absorbing the impact with a heavy, concussive thud that sent a cloud of red dust into the air. He stalked toward the defensive line, his massive armored frame casting a long, dark shadow over the human cadets. "Cease fire," CRA barked, his voice amplified by the translation collar at his throat. The sound was like grinding stones. The drones powered down. The cadets lowered their weapons, snapping to attention. Wyatt stood perfectly still, his eyes locked straight ahead, fixing his gaze on a dent in CRA's chest plating. "Cadet Cole." CRA loomed over the young man. The top of Wyatt's helmet barely reached the alien general's sternum. "Your squad's reaction time is pathetic. You are relying on brute obstinacy rather than fluid tactical withdrawal. You are a soft, water-filled sack of liabilities." Wyatt didn't blink. "Sir, the objective was to hold the line." "The line is held, sir." CRA's mandibles flared. Insubordination. The Othari military structure operated on absolute physical dominance. If a subordinate talked back, the superior officer was legally and culturally obligated to put them in their place with physical force. It was called the Tim's Carottle, a disciplinary strike meant to induce submission, not death. To CRA, humanity needed to learn the Tim's Carottle. They needed to understand that despite their entry into the galactic community, they were at the bottom of the food chain. "You dare quote the objective to me, fleshy ape?" CRA hissed, leaning down so his multifaceted black eyes were inches from Wyatt's face. The rest of the human squad tensed. Commander Sarah Jenkins, the human liaison officer observing from the upper deck, immediately reached for her comms to abort the exercise. She had read the psychological profiles of the Othari. She knew what was coming. "General CRA, stand down." Her voice echoed over the PA system. CRA ignored her. He raised his right arm, the thick obsidian-like plates of his hand forming a massive, jagged fist. He didn't intend to kill the boy. He intended to deliver a backhand strike to the side of the cadet's head. Just enough force to send him sprawling into the dirt, perhaps crack that fragile-looking skull slightly, and force him to kneel. Wyatt saw the strike coming. His PMC training, his time in the rough sectors of the asteroid belt, and millions of years of human evolutionary survival instincts kicked in. But Wyatt didn't dodge. Dodging would show fear. Dodging would mean breaking the line. Instead, Wyatt simply braced. He planted his boots into the Martian dirt, tucked his chin slightly, tightened his neck muscles, which were denser than braided steel cable compared to alien anatomy, and locked his jaw. When an Othari strikes, their hydraulic musculature snaps their limbs forward at speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour. It is a kinetic event that can punch through starship bulkheads. CRA's massive armored backhand collided with the side of Wyatt Cole's head. The impact, the sound was not the sickening thud of flesh tearing or a human neck snapping. Instead, it was a sharp, deafening crack, like a high-yield artillery shell detonating inside a cavern. Physics is a harsh and unforgiving mistress. General CRA had calculated the force needed to incapacitate a soft, low-gravity organism. What his hand met was a human skull. A solid, fused dome of calcium phosphate reinforced by 19 years of microfractures, terrestrial gravity, and a heavy dairy and protein diet. Furthermore, Wyatt's neck muscles, acting as shock absorbers, didn't give way. Newton's third law of motion dictates that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. The immense kinetic energy of CRA's strike had nowhere to go. It could not displace Wyatt's head, so it rebounded back into the alien's own arm. CRA's natural armor, while incredibly hard, was entirely inflexible. It lacked the spongy, shock-absorbing marrow of mammalian bones. The sheer kinetic rebound rippled up CRA's forearm. Inside the chitinous shell, his carbon silicate bone structure shattered into 1,000 jagged microscopic shards. The hydraulic fiber bundles tore violently under the extreme, sudden compression. Wyatt's head merely snapped a few inches to the left. The cadet's cheek split open, splashing a vibrant streak of crimson blood across his own shoulder. But his boots didn't move an inch. He didn't fall. He didn't even stumble. Second 2, the predator awakens. CRA stood frozen, his brain incapable of processing the sensory input it was receiving. His dominant arm hung limply at his side, a ruined, pulverized mess inside its intact outer shell. The pain hadn't even registered yet. The Othari nervous system was slightly slower than a human's, evolved for deliberate, calculated warfare rather than split-second terrestrial survival. But Wyatt Cole's nervous system was already firing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. The strike triggered the most terrifying biological weapon in the human arsenal, the endocrine system. The moment CRA's hand made contact, Wyatt's adrenal glands dumped massive amounts of epinephrine and cortisol directly into his bloodstream. His pupils dilated until his eyes looked like pitch-black voids. His heart rate spiked from a calm 60 to 180 beats per minute. Blood rushed away from his digestive tract and flooded into his skeletal muscles. His pain receptors were instantly shut down, overridden by a primal, burning imperative. Destroy the threat. Wyatt slowly turned his head back to face the alien general. The Othari had a secret they didn't advertise to the galaxy. They possessed a latent, short-range empathic network. It was how their squads coordinated so flawlessly in battle, communicating intent and emotion without speaking. They could feel the fear of their enemies, the breaking of their morale. It was a tool of psychological dominance. As Wyatt locked eyes with CRA, the cadet didn't project fear. He projected a wall of unadulterated, blinding rage. Through the empathic field, CRA suddenly felt what it was like to be a human under the influence of extreme adrenaline. The alien's highly sensitive telepathic receptors were utterly flooded by the sheer violence of Wyatt's psychic broadcast. It was like standing in front of a raging sun. CRA felt the predatory instinct of an apex species that had spent millennia hunting mammoths with pointed sticks, surviving ice ages, and fighting brutal mechanized world wars. It was a chaotic, burning hunger for violence. Second 3, the collapse. The physical pain of the shattered arm finally hit CRA's brain, arriving at the exact same moment as the psychic shockwave of Wyatt's adrenal rage. The combination was apocalyptic. CRA's rigid body seized. His multifaceted eyes widened in absolute, incomprehensible terror. He tried to take a step back, but his legs lost their hydraulic pressure. The towering 8-foot war master of the Othari Empire collapsed onto the red Martian dust, his knees hitting the ground with a heavy thud. Wyatt took one step forward. The human cadet didn't say a word. He didn't raise his rifle. He just stood over the kneeling alien, blood dripping steadily from his chin. His chest heaving as the combat stimulants manufactured by his own body prepared him to tear the alien apart with his bare hands. "Please," CRA gasped. The entire training yard fell completely silent. The Sylvans stared in mute horror. The human squad members gripped their rifles, entirely unsurprised, but acutely aware of the political disaster unfolding. CRA's translation collar buzzed, struggling to catch his ragged, hyperventilating breaths. The psychic pressure radiating from the bleeding human was crushing his mind. He felt like prey. For the first time, General CRA understood what it meant to be hunted. "Please, make it stop," the alien general begged, clutching his ruined, pulped arm against his chest. His head bowed before a 19-year-old kid from Chicago. "The noise, the burning in my mind. Tell him to stop." Up on the observation deck, Commander Sarah Jenkins exhaled a long, slow breath. She tapped her comms. "Cadet Cole," she said, her voice remarkably calm. "Stand down. That's an order." Took a moment. Wyatt blinked, the deep, primal darkness in his eyes slowly receding as his prefrontal cortex wrestled control back from his amygdala. He took a deep breath, wiped the blood from his cheek with the back of his tactical glove, and took a step back. "Sir." "Yes, sir," Wyatt replied, his voice slightly raspy but perfectly steady. The psychic weight vanished from CRA's mind, leaving the alien gasping for air in the dirt, shivering violently. The medical bay at Olympus Mons was a marvel of galactic engineering, designed to treat over 50 different species. But when the medical staff, mostly multi-limbed, highly logical beings from the core worlds, scanned General CRA's arm, they assumed the diagnostic machine was malfunctioning. "There is no bone structure left," the chief medical officer, a gelatinous being named Dr. Titcher, stated, hovering over the hollow display. "It is gravel. The hydraulic fibers are entirely severed. To sustain this level of localized kinetic trauma, the general must have struck a Class 4 starship hull plate at maximum velocity. Commander Jenkins stood near the doorway, her arms crossed. Beside her stood a representative from Palantir Astroanalytics, a shadow corporation that handled humanity's off-world intelligence gathering. The suit-wearing representative, a man named Henderson, was tapping away on a data pad, looking entirely too smug. CRA lay on the biobed, his arm encased in a stasis field. He was heavily sedated, but his eyes darted nervously toward Jenkins. The arrogance was completely gone. In its place was a lingering, haunted paranoia. "He struck a human cadet," Jenkins said plainly. The medical officer's primary eye stalk turned toward Jenkins. "Impossible. Human bone density is recorded at standard galactic metrics. They are soft-tissue organisms. A strike of this magnitude against a human skull should have resulted in catastrophic cranial vaporization." Henderson chuckled, a dry corporate sound. He stepped forward, pulling up a heavily encrypted file on his pad. "Doctor, the data the Galactic Concordat has on human biology is heavily redacted. We supplied the entry files when we joined the coalition. We left a few things out." CRA tried to speak, his vocal cords struggling against the sedatives. What are you?" Henderson swiped a finger across his pad, projecting a 3D anatomical model of Wyatt Cole into the center of the room. "The galaxy operates on a baseline of planetary gravity. Most of your species evolved on worlds with 0.4 to 0.6 standard G. Earth sits at a solid 1. But it's not just gravity, General CRA. It's evolution." Henderson zoomed in on the human skeleton. "Our bones aren't rigid silicates. They are dynamic, living tissue, a calcium phosphate matrix interwoven with collagen. They flex. They absorb impact, and under stress they microfracture and heal back thicker." Cadet Cole spent his youth doing hard labor. His skull is practically a shock-absorbing anvil. Jenkins stepped closer to the bed. "But that's not why you fell to your knees, is it, General? Your arm broke, yes. But an Othari war master doesn't beg because of a broken arm." CRA shuddered, looking away. The darkness, the sheer, unbridled malice. It flooded the empathic spectrum. He wasn't thinking of defense. He was thinking of how to dismantle me. "Ah, yes," Henderson said with a thin smile. "The adrenal response. You see, when humans are threatened, our bodies flood with a chemical cocktail that essentially turns us into temporary super soldiers. It bypasses our pain inhibitors, massively increases our reaction time, and shifts our psychology into a hyper-aggressive survival state. From what our Palantir analysts have gathered, your species uses low-level telepathy to sense fear in your prey." Henderson leaned over the bed. "You didn't sense fear, General. You tapped into millions of years of apex predator instinct. You touched the mind of a creature whose ancestors used to chase massive beasts for miles until the animals collapsed from sheer exhaustion, just so the humans could butcher them. You poked a sleeping bear, and you felt its teeth in your mind." The doors to the med bay hissed open, and Wyatt Cole walked in. He had a small dermal patch over his left cheek, but otherwise he looked completely fine. He carried a data pad in his hand. CRA visibly flinched, trying to push himself back against the biobed's headboard. The terror was still there. The alien couldn't separate the quiet, polite cadet from the psychic demon he had encountered in the dirt. "Cadet Cole," Jenkins said. "Report." "Sir," Wyatt said, offering a crisp salute. "I brought the incident report for the General's signature. As per training regulations, any injury sustained during a sparring drill requires a sign-off to clear the Academy of liability." Wyatt stepped toward the bed and held out the pad. CRA stared at the human's hand. A small, pale, 5-fingered appendage. It looked so fragile, yet CRA knew the terrifying biological machinery hiding beneath that skin. With a trembling, uninjured left hand, the giant alien reached out and pressed his thumbprint against the screen. "Thank you, General," Wyatt said softly. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. And somehow, to CRA, that made it infinitely more terrifying. The human could turn the monster on and off at will. As Wyatt left the room, Henderson turned to Jenkins. Well, Commander, I think the Othari Empire will be revising their assessment of human combat viability. Jenkins looked at the trembling alien general. I think the whole damn galaxy is going to revise their assessment. The footage of General CRA falling to his knees before a 19-year-old human cadet did not stay contained within the Olympus Mons Joint Military Academy. Despite Commander Jenkins's immediate lockdown of the facility's local intranet, the data had already been siphoned. Palantir Astroanalytics, operating under classified directives from Earth's Defense Council, had deliberately routed the raw telemetry and optical feeds through a secure quantum relay directly to corporate servers in Geneva. Within 24 hours, the incident was the most tightly guarded, yet explosively impactful secret in the solar system. The immediate geopolitical ramifications were staggering. On Earth, defense contractors realized the paradigm had shifted. Human stock was no longer tied to our starships, which were admittedly decades behind Concorde technology. The asset was the human body itself. Corporations like Raytheon Exodynamics and Aegis Defense Services began quietly liquidating their heavy plasma research divisions and aggressively restructuring their portfolios to focus on infantry deployment contracts, close-quarters combat stimulants, and kinetic armor. If humanity was a species of hyperdense persistence predators, the market for mercenary shock troops was about to explode. But across the galaxy, on the high-gravity throne world of Othar Prime, the reaction was not one of economic opportunity. It was one of absolute, unmitigated outrage. The Othari Empire's entire cultural and political hegemony was built on physical supremacy. To be Othari was to be unbreakable. The rumor that one of their most decorated war masters had been physically shattered and psychically broken by a soft-skinned primate was a destabilizing force that threatened the Emperor's ruling coalition. 3 days after the incident, a massive Othari dreadnought warped into Mars orbit, casting a shadow over the Olympus Mons dome. High Counselor Xylock, a senior diplomat of the Othari ruling caste, descended to the Academy with a contingent of elite honor guards. Commander Jenkins, accompanied by Secretary of Earth Affairs Nathaniel Cross and Palantir Operative Henderson, met the alien delegation in the Academy's central amphitheater. The air was thick with tension, the atmospheric scrubbers humming loudly in the silence. Xylock loomed over the human delegation. His chitinous armor was embedded with ceremonial gold filigree, and his 4 mandibles clicked in a rapid, aggressive cadence. "The footage is a fabrication," Xylock declared, his translation collar booming across the empty amphitheater. "A sophisticated digital manipulation designed by your intelligence agencies to undermine the Concordat hierarchy. General CRA suffered a sudden catastrophic degradation of his cybernetic implants, not a defeat by a primate." Secretary Cross, a seasoned politician who had cut his teeth negotiating water rights during the North American droughts, didn't flinch. "Counselor Xylock, we have the medical telemetry from the Concordat's own chief medical officer. The trauma was kinetic. The psychological shock was biological. There is no fabrication. If your species is as formidable as this anomaly suggests," Xylock hissed, leaning forward, "then you will not object to the right of prime." Jenkins exchanged a sharp look with Henderson. The right of prime was an archaic Othari tradition, rarely invoked in the modern era. It was a sanctioned, unarmored gladiatorial combat meant to settle disputes of honor and biological supremacy between species. Xylock raised a massive 4-fingered hand, projecting a holographic document between them. "General CRA's honor, and the honor of the Othari Empire, must be cleansed. We demand a formal exhibition of combat. Your Cadet Cole against our chosen champion. If the cadet survives for 5 standard minutes, we will acknowledge the validity of the event and Earth's place in the vanguard. If he is broken, humanity will be stripped of its military standing and relegated to a Class 3 subservient thrall species." Jenkins stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "Absolutely not. Cadet Cole is a trainee, not a gladiator. The United Earth Directorate does not participate in blood sports." "I accept." A quiet voice echoed from the entrance of the amphitheater. Everyone turned. Wyatt Cole stood in the doorway, dressed in standard gray fatigue pants and a black compression shirt. He looked relaxed, his hands resting loosely at his sides. The dermal patch was gone from his cheek, leaving only a faint pink scar. "Cadet, you are out of line," Jenkins barked. "Return to your quarters." "Commander, with all due respect, if I don't fight, they'll spend the next century trying to prove it was a fluke." Wyatt walked down the steps toward the delegation. He stopped a few feet from Xyloc, tilting his head back to look the towering alien in the eye. "I spent 3 years hauling or for academy. I know how bullies work. You punch the biggest one in the mouth, or they never stop bothering you." Xyloc's multifaceted eyes narrowed. He could sense no fear from the boy, only a chilling, calculated calm. "You are arrogant, human." "I'm pragmatic," Wyatt replied. "What are the rules?" Xyloc smirked, his mandibles flaring. "Unarmored. No kinetic weapons. No energy blades. A purely biological contest of strength, endurance, and will, to the point of submission or incapacitation." Before the match, Palantir Astroanalytics compiled a classified briefing for the Earth Defense Council, outlining exactly why Wyatt was about to face the galaxy's most feared species and why the analysts were betting heavily on the human. The report highlighted 3 critical human biological advantages that the galaxy had fundamentally overlooked. Lactic acid processing. Alien species, particularly the Othari, operate on burst mechanics. Their hydraulic musculature is devastating but produces toxic metabolic byproducts rapidly. They require periods of total rest to flush their systems. Humans produce lactic acid, but our bodies continuously process and recycle it during active movement, granting us terrifying, almost localized infinite stamina. Thermal regulation. Sweating. The Othari do not sweat. They dissipate heat through panting and radiating it from their chitinous plates. In sustained combat, their internal temperature spikes, leading to inevitable hydraulic failure. Essentially, they overheat like poorly cooled engines. Humans possess millions of eccrine glands, allowing us to actively cool ourselves while exerting maximum physical effort. We are the ultimate persistence engine. Leverage and torque. Othari biology is rigid. Their joints function like heavy-duty industrial hinges capable of immense compression force but highly vulnerable to lateral torque. Human martial arts, developed over thousands of years, are entirely predicated on exploiting leverage, joint isolation, and angular momentum. Henderson sat with Wyatt in the locker room an hour before the exhibition. He handed the cadet a tablet with the biological breakdown of his opponent, Warlord Vorith, a 9-foot-tall veteran of the Outer Rim suppressions. "Vorith is fast, Wyatt," Henderson warned, adjusting his glasses. "Faster than CRA. He's gonna try to end this in the first 10 seconds with a lethal strike. He won't underestimate your skull this time. He'll go for the soft tissue, the throat, the abdomen." Wyatt wrapped his hands with heavy athletic tape, his movements methodical and practiced. "He's built like a tank, Mr. Henderson. Tanks are great for blowing things up. They suck at long-distance foot races." "You plan to run?" Wyatt smiled. A sharp, predatory glint appeared in his eye. "I plan to make him work. I'm going to drag him into the deep water, and I'm going to watch him drown." The grand arena of Olympus Mons was packed to absolute capacity. Over 50,000 spectators representing 70 species filled the sweeping stadium-style seating, while billions more watched the encrypted extranet broadcast. The air in the arena was chilled to a crisp 10 degrees Celsius to mimic standard Martian atmospheric conditions inside the dome, a factor the human delegation had insisted upon under the guise of home field comfort. The center of the arena was a massive circle of compacted rust-red Martian soil. No cover, no gravity dampeners, just raw, unyielding dirt. When Warlord Vorith entered, the Othari delegation erupted into a deafening chorus of clicking mandibles and stomping feet. Vorith was a nightmare of biological engineering. His obsidian chitin was scarred and pitted from decades of war. His arms were incredibly thick, and his legs moved with terrifying mechanical precision. He stepped into the center of the ring, radiating an aura of absolute violence. Then Wyatt Cole walked out. The contrast was almost comical. Wyatt wore simple black grappling shorts and was bare-chested, his pale skin stark against the red dirt. He wasn't overly muscular, just dense and wiry, built like a lightweight boxer. To the uninitiated alien spectators, He looked like a sacrificial lamb being offered to a slaughterhouse machine. Commander Jenkins stood in the primary observation box, her hands gripping the railing tightly enough to turn her knuckles white. Secretary Cross stood beside her, sipping a glass of synthetic bourbon, his face an unreadable mask. A hovering Sylvan referee drone descended into the center of the ring, flashing a brilliant green light. The rite of prime had begun. Vorath did exactly what Henderson predicted. The alien warlord didn't posture or roar. He exploded forward. The hydraulic bundles in his legs propelled his massive frame across the 20 yards separating them in less than 2 seconds. He launched a devastating sweeping hook aimed directly at Wyatt's ribcage, intending to crush the human's organs with the very first strike. Wyatt didn't brace this time. He knew he couldn't tank a body shot from a 9-foot alien. Relying on his DARPA centrifuge conditioning and terrestrial reflexes, Wyatt dropped. He didn't just duck. He threw his entire body weight toward the dirt, executing a flawless combat slide beneath the swinging arc of Vorath's arm. As he slid past the alien's massive legs, Wyatt lashed out with his taped foot, striking the back of Vorath's knee joint. The blow didn't damage the alien, but the sheer unexpected density of the human strike forced Vorath's leg to buckle slightly, ruining his momentum. Vorath stumbled, his massive fist cleaving through empty air, kicking up a storm of red dust. The arena went dead silent. The human had dodged. Vorath spun around, his empathic field flaring with irritation. He lashed out with a rapid succession of strikes, jabs and crosses that would have reduced reinforced concrete to powder. Wyatt engaged in a masterpiece of human defensive biomechanics. He utilized the Philly shell boxing stance and head movement, slipping past the devastating punches by mere millimeters. He didn't block. Blocking would shatter his forearms. He parried, redirecting the alien's kinetic energy outward. He slipped, ducked, pivoted, and circled. Every time Vorath missed, the massive alien expended a tremendous amount of energy. The hydraulic fibers snapped and recoiled, generating immense internal heat. "Stand still, vermin!" Vorath roared, his translation collar buzzing furiously. "Make me, bug!" Wyatt spat back, intentionally provoking the warlord. For 2 full minutes, the arena watched an impossible dance. The 9-foot apex predator of the galaxy was being led on a frantic, exhausting chase by a 19-year-old primate. Vorath was swinging with enough force to fell trees, but he was hitting nothing but shadows and Martian air. At the 3-minute mark, the environmental shift began. The chilled 10 degrees Celsius air of the arena began to take its toll on Vorath. The Othari anatomy, lacking sweat glands, was desperately trying to vent the catastrophic amount of internal heat generated by his constant explosive misses. Vorath's mandibles spread wide, panting heavily. The microfissures in his chitinous armor began venting faint wisps of steam. His movements, initially blindingly fast, were beginning to fractionally slow. The hydraulic bundles were overheating. Wyatt, conversely, was glistening. The millions of eccrine glands across his skin had activated, coating his torso and arms in a fine layer of sweat. As the cold Martian air hit the moisture, it rapidly evaporated, drawing heat directly out of his core. Wyatt was a biological marvel, an engine perfectly designed to cool itself while running at maximum RPM. He wasn't tired. He was just getting warmed up. "Notice the alien's kinetic output," Henderson murmured in the observation box, tapping his data pad. "Efficiency is down 40%. The hydraulic fluid in his limbs is literally boiling." "And Cole?" Jenkins asked, her eyes glued to the dirt below. "His heart rate is 140. Adrenaline levels are stable. He hasn't even entered the panic state he used on CRA." Henderson smiled. "He's just working out." Down in the ring, Vorath launched another massive overhand strike driven by pure frustration. But this time, his arm was sluggish. Wyatt didn't slip away. He stepped inside the guard. With a burst of terrifying terrestrial speed, Wyatt closed the distance, stepping inside the arc of the alien's arm. He drove his shoulder directly into Vorath's chest plate. It was like hitting a brick wall. But Wyatt wasn't trying to break the wall. He was trying to shift its center of gravity. As Vorith rocked backward onto his heels, Wyatt reached up and grabbed the alien's extended right arm. Human martial arts are a terrifying concept to species that rely solely on brute force. Wyatt utilized an ancient terrestrial technique, a standing arm triangle setup transitioning into a flying armbar. He leaped off the Martian dirt, using his dense 170-pound frame as a kinetic counterweight. He wrapped his legs tightly around Vorith's neck and shoulder joint, isolating the massive right arm between his thighs, and threw his weight backward toward the ground. The sudden application of localized leverage was devastating. Vorith, already exhausted and off balance, couldn't stop the human from dragging him down. The 9-foot warlord crashed face-first into the red Martian dirt, sending a shockwave through the arena floor. Wyatt hit the ground on his back. The alien's thick armored arm locked tightly against his chest, secured by his hips and legs. "Now," Wyatt whispered through gritted teeth. He bridged his hips upward. The Othari arm was built to withstand crushing downward pressure and massive frontal impacts. It was absolutely not designed to bend backward at a 45-degree angle over a human pelvic bone acting as a fulcrum. The tension in the arena was thick enough to cut with a knife. For 3 agonizing seconds, the silence was broken only by the horrific straining sound of Othari hydraulic fibers stretching beyond their maximum tolerance. Vorith let out a guttural, terrifying shriek of agony, his free hand clawing desperately at the dirt. Snap! The sound echoed like a gunshot. The unbendable, unbreakable carbon silicate joint of the Othari warlord shattered outward, dark blue biofluid erupting from the ruptured seals. Vorith's arm bent entirely backward, destroyed by the simple application of high school physics and human biomechanics. Vorith slammed his remaining hand frantically against the red dirt. Tap, tap, tap. He was submitting. Wyatt immediately released the pressure. He unlocked his legs, rolled backward with the grace of a gymnast, and stood up. He didn't celebrate. He didn't scream a battle cry to the heavens. He simply wiped the sweat from his forehead, took a deep breath, and looked up at the Othari delegation box. High Counselor Xylox stood completely frozen, his 4 mandibles hanging slack in utter disbelief. The greatest warrior of their generation had been dismantled, outlasted, and physically broken by a creature less than half his size. The hovering Sylvan referee drone flashed a brilliant red light, signaling the end of the match. The official time was exactly 4 minutes and 12 seconds. The silence in the arena finally broke. It wasn't cheers, but a low, terrified murmur that rippled through the thousands of alien spectators. They looked at the sweating, heavily breathing human standing over the ruined alien champion, and they finally understood the terrifying truth about Earth. The humans weren't a soft, fragile species that needed protection. They were the monsters hiding in the dark, forged in the crushing gravity and brutal evolutionary crucible of a death world. They were the apex predators, and they had just been let off the leash. Secretary Cross took a slow sip of his bourbon, a predatory smile spreading across his face. "Well, Commander Jenkins, I believe we just won the Vanguard contract." Jenkins exhaled a long breath, a mix of awe and terror washing over her. "May God have mercy on anyone who declares war on us." Down in the ring, Wyatt Cole walked over to the medical teams rushing toward the screaming alien. He bent down, picked up his discarded towel, draped it over his shoulders, and walked out of the arena. He had a logistics exam in the morning, and he really didn't want to be late. Humanity didn't just join the galactic community. We rewrote its rules of survival. From the crushing gravity of Earth to the red dust of Mars, we proved that endurance and willpower are the ultimate weapons. If you enjoyed this epic sci-fi journey of Wyatt Cole showing the galaxy why humans are the true apex predators, please leave a like, share this story with your fellow Deathworlders, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible HFY content every single week.